Welcome to the Man Cave Podcast with Dan Casper.
He is Dr. Austin Crowe, Chippewa Valley Orthopedics and Sports Medicine, joining us here this morning. How we doing, Austin?
I'm doing fantastic.
Hey, that a boy. Hey, it is football season going on right now. We got our first preseason games in the books. They're coming up this weekend. Is it starting to feel like football for you? A little chilly out there this morning, too. Is it starting to kind of get into your veins a little bit?
Oh, it is, yeah. I decided to end up helping out my son's football team, so I'm doing some coaching this year, so it's really real this year for me.
Oh, look at that. Are you helping out with the linebackers back to your old playing days, or what?
They actually had me at defensive line, defensive end, so kind of similar, so
nice.
Close enough. I still remember a couple things from the old glory days.
That'll boy. Well, I'm going to have to check out a practice now and give you a little hard time maybe or something like that, too. So that's awesome. That's going to be cool. So... Hey, speaking of football, I saw the NFL's doctor, Dr. Alan Stills. He was with Pat McAfee yesterday on his program, and one of the main topics, and we see it a lot in practice and training camp, is those shells on their helmets to help prevent concussions. Everybody kind of has seen that. He made an interesting he made a comment yesterday, I should say, that they've permitted to use it during games this year. I was just kind of curious your thoughts on that, and do you think that could, and it's all relative and it's not going to be 100% perfect in that, but could you see that as a trend where maybe more players are going to start to wear those shells outside their helmets actually during games in the foreseeable future?
I mean, I think it depends on what the data ends up showing. I mean, I think there's some preliminary stuff on those. It's hard because, I mean, concussions, thankfully, are a relatively uncommon event. So it's hard to really prove that those are going to make a big difference. But I think we're going to try, see a lot of different things that are to minimize that. I mean, if you really look at kind of the existential threats for football, that is really high on the list, is that, there's this concern for these head injuries, repetitive or acute injuries. So CTE. And I mean, I think, we're going to try to use every weapon at our disposal to do it. So, I mean, whether, last year they got a little bit popular, those little kind of C collars people were wearing that supposedly increases the venous pressure in the brain to cushion, whether it's a pad on the helmet. I think one thing you have seen clearly is change to practice, and, hitting isn't, I mean, when we were young, you were going full go every practice all day, every day. And now they do a lot more walkthrough, going through the motions. And so I think there's also going to be some of that risk mitigation. So to answer your question, yes, I do think we may see more of that. It's not really detrimental. I mean, it doesn't really affect the play in a real negative way. So I'm guessing it will catch on, but obviously we have to see how it pans out and if it really makes a big difference or not.
And I know you mentioned too, and this is, I think that maybe they've gone through it every year, but they said that, they've got like 12 new different helmets and 6 of them have already, pass better than any other helmet that they've ever had before. But I got to imagine that's something that's going to be like every year they look at improving helmets to help avoid that.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, there's different materials, different constructs. The idea is, of course, you want it to take a bit of the blow, but it has to obviously be strong enough not to break. That would be not an ideal helmet. So they're always looking at ways to do that. And so you can see they've almost kind of changed the shape slightly. And then they have different slots in them. Again, the idea is that it takes an impact, and some of the impact goes through the helmet as opposed to being transferred to the skull and then ultimately the brain. So yeah, there's absolutely research going on. And I mean, we were on the market for our son for buying a helmet this year, and we did research on it. And every company says they have the best one, of course, but there's no question that they're coming out every year now. Maybe I'm a little bit glasses half empty on it. I do wonder if it's a little bit marketing as well. It's like every year somehow there's one that's dramatically better, and helmets aren't cheap, so maybe it's a bit of a marketing ploy as well. But still, I mean, I think we need to take that seriously, and so I do think that that's going to be one of the things that they're going to look at as ways to change the technology of the helmet.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of it is, players being comfortable. Wasn't it Antonio Brown? Was he with the Raiders and he threw that fit about wanting his old helmet or something like that? Do you remember that story a couple of years ago?
I do. Yeah. I think it was one of the old ones that they weren't allowed to wear anymore.
Yeah.
Although that guy would find something to gripe about no matter what. But still.
Exactly. Hey, this was something that was kind of just casually brought up the other day. It might have been Bob or something like that. I think he kind of casually said, why does it seem like there's more injuries in sports this year than in years past? And I know we've kind of talked about, the good old days, right, where you could throw 150 pitches and and all that. But do you think, just to maybe make it similar or just to make it simple, are athletes in today's day and world or day and age in sports just bigger, faster, and stronger, and that's why maybe we see some more injuries to these guys or gals?
That's part of it, without a doubt. Without a doubt. I mean, across the board, as they say, records are made to be broken. Why? Because people are bigger, faster, stronger. They're pushing themselves. They have that target to hit. And so, I mean, just simply look at, if we're going to talk baseball, the velocity, the amount of break and spin they put on the ball. I mean, the forces come from somewhere, and that somewhere is their arms. So when you're doing that, you're really pushing the human body to its limits. And so with that, you're going to sometimes push that a little too far, and you get injuries to whether it's the UCL or the labrum in the shoulder or whatever it may be. Or in football where you have, if you took an offensive lineman from the 1960s and put him in today's day and age, they would just be undersized, not fast. It's just changed. The game has changed. It's just unbelievable. And those were the top athletes back then. So it's not like, they were just some Joe Schmoes. My grandpa played football for the University of Texas, in the 1940s. And I remember looking at one of his, kind of brochures or handouts from the game, and the average size of their offensive line was like 215 pounds.
Man.
You wouldn't even be, the wide receivers weigh that much now. It's just unreal. And that's obviously one of the biggest football schools in the country. So it just has changed. So yes, to answer, that's absolutely part of it. I think there's also the part of it where, our diagnostic abilities are better. So whether it's with advanced imaging and MRI, CTs, we're able to see injuries that are smaller. That maybe before it was like, look, yeah, your hip hurts, just live with it. And now we can get an MRI and say, look, you have a torn labrum in your hip, and people are getting treated. So there may be a little bit of that as well. But, if I had to point to one factor, we're just pushing our bodies closer and closer to the limit of what it can physically handle.
And that's kind of what I was going to ask next, because it seems like, now athletes if they're not playing, they're training every day, right? They're working out, or back in the 60s or something, if a Packer player wasn't playing, he might be selling cars or working, at a different job or something like that.
That's right.
Is that, part of it too, where there's that constant wear and tear if you're always working out, even if you're not playing a particular game that week or anything?
Yeah, that is absolutely part of it. And we've talked about this. There's two separate kind of categories, if you will, of injuries. There's acute, and then there's chronic overuse injuries. And so there's repetitive exposure to something not only increases the risk of chronic overuse injuries, but it does. Every time you're exposed to the football field, there's a chance you're going to get tackled and break your leg, right? So there's that as well. So the number of exposures increases the rate of acute injuries, but then also if you're doing the same sport over and over, and we've talked about this in the past as well, multi-sport athletes, especially in the youth, it's nice to have variability and cross-training because you do work different muscle groups and you don't have that same risk of chronic overuse. So I'm a big fan of multi-sports in young athletes. So those are different things that do play a role as well. So absolutely, I would agree with that. Speaking
of Texas, your running back, C.J. Baxter, suffered a knee injury in practice, tearing his LCL and his PCL. How rare is it to tear those two and maybe not tear your ACL in your knee?
So not that rare. When you injure one of the cruciates, so that the two cruciates are the ACL and the PCL. ACL is certainly more well known because it's more commonly injured. But with that, you usually have at least a little bit of an injury to one of the collaterals, which are what do we call that, MCL, and then the LCL is part of a collective group we call the posterolateral corner. So when we look at the posterolateral corner, which is what the LCL is part of, that often does go hand in hand with a PCL injury. So generally speaking, these injuries are going to be either a direct blow or a significant rotational deformity, so they plant and the leg gets twisted up underneath them. So those two will often go hand in hand with a kind of a combo injury. So it's a significant injury. So honestly, I would much rather have a standalone ACL or an ACL MCL than a PCL posterolateral corner. That's a tough injury. Not to say you can't recover from it, but those are ones that just the recovery rates just aren't quite as high. But whenever you have two significant ligaments injured in a knee, it's definitely a much more serious injury, and the future is a little bit less optimistic. But still, with the techniques we have for reconstruction, we still have hopes that athlete's going to get back to the level they were before. But he's facing a big surgery and big recovery, no question.
And does the fact that he played running back kind of factor into that too, with maybe it might be a little difficult for him to recover and get back to his high level of play?
Absolutely. I mean, you look at what a running back needs to do. I mean, there's a handful of positions on the football field that need to do it, but I think running back's pretty high on that list of people that need to be able to accelerate. They need top-end speed, and they need to be able to change direction very quickly. And how do you do that? Well, you plant your foot in the ground and pivot and twist, right? So the knee needs to be incredibly stable and incredibly strong to do that. So it is a tough injury. It's tough to see a guy go through that, but I'm sure he's in good hands down there, and we'll get a good reconstruction. And then the rehab begins. For that, you're looking at probably a year before they're able to play. So he's going to be clearly done for this season, and a majority of the offseason will be spent building that leg back up and getting nice, strong quads and hammies to support the reconstruction. And we're hoping he'll be back for camp next year.
Mm-hmm. To wrap it up, going to your Twinnies, Joe Ryan, pitcher over there, just a couple days ago, had to leave the game early to what they were saying, right tricep tightness. Rocco Baldelli said, though, that they're hoping it's not some type of large-scale issue. If it is a large type of scale issue, what could it potentially be, in your opinion, if it's a tightness issue in his triceps?
Yeah, I mean, that's an atypical one for sure. I mean, we see plenty of shoulder and elbow issues in throwers, so that's not unique. But triceps in and of itself is a little bit more atypical. So if you look at the triceps itself back there, I mean, it's a muscle, right? So it has three heads, hence the term tri. Comes down to the back of the elbow, and it sounds like you're describing it closer towards the elbow from what I've read. So then you're probably looking at a tendon-based issue, or as it transitions from the muscle to the tendon. So if this is simply going to be a strain in that area, that could be, again, more in the muscle end, or some inflammation or tendinopathy in the elbow itself. The good news is the major ligaments, so the Tommy John or the lateral ligaments, are on the sides, and so you're not going to get those kind of quote-unquote confused, because sometimes you do have medial elbow pain that could be a flexor strain, or it could be the UCL. In the back, it's kind of the triceps, and that's it. So the hope is, I'm guessing what they're hoping is that was just kind of a little bit of a muscle injury, so again, a strain to that muscle belly. But if it is more of a chronic tendinopathy that's beginning, well, that can take a little bit longer to go away. Not going to be serious in the sense of like, oh, his career's over, or needing surgery, but it could be, wow, this is going to nag him for a while, and he's going to have to maybe take a little bit of time on the IR and get it to heal up. So I'm sure they're hoping it's not the tendon and it's more of a muscle-based issue. But the MRI, I think he had an MRI already, or he's going to, and it didn't show too much. So hopefully it'll bounce back quickly.
He's Dr. Austin Crowe, Chippewa Valley Orthopedics and Sports Medicine. Now that you're coaching, we start practice flag football next week, so I may have to convince you to be a guest coach for a week at practice or something like that.
Absolutely. I'll get down there, show them some pass rush moves.
Yes, for second graders. Yes, you have to do that. So we appreciate it, buddy. As always, enjoy your weekend, and we'll catch up with you again soon, okay?
Absolutely. Take care, Dan.
You got it. There you go. Dr. Austin Crowe, Chippewa Valley Orthopedics and Sports Medicine.